Welcome, everyone. This is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspective, social impacts, or related topics. This podcast often features discussion with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to the Other Side of Addiction podcast. I am your host, Al Richards, and today we're going to be talking about Project Recovery with our guest, Casey Scott. Casey, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. I remember when you did my podcast, I think it was what, 2020?
2020, yes. Yep.
And what I thought was unique about your story was it wasn't the side of an addict being an addict. It was the side of being in love with an addict. If I remember correctly, did I have that right?
Yeah, you nailed it, Casey. Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember you even asked me if we were still married, and I said, yeah. Unfortunately, we are not now. She relapsed after 2.5 years of sobriety on the day before my 60th birthday, and I
Ah.
pretty much threw my hands up and said, I'm not going through this again. I stood by her for 8 years, and I wasn't willing to do it again this time.
That seems like a good jumping off point to talk about all things recovery and addiction. And it's something we say on my podcast, Project Recovery, with Casey Scott and Dr. Matt Woolley, that addiction is a family disease. I've now been sober more than 5 years. I remember in the throes of my addiction, and I lost a marriage too because of addiction. My ex-wife would be like, "Hey, why don't you got to stop drinking. This is ruining the family." And I'd be like, what do you care? I mean, it wasn't that I didn't care that it was ruining the family, but it's like, what do you care what I do to my body? I'm not asking you to drink. I'm not, this is my body and my life, and I want to do what I do. But what I didn't realize is what a family disease it really is. That what I was doing to myself was not just myself. It was my loved ones. It was my immediate family. It was my work family. It was my social circles. And it really was a disease that kind of just spread out into all facets of my life.
And my gosh, I got goosebumps over here, and I was even starting to get some tears in my eyes because, that's exactly what happens, right? I remember times when I would come home and my wife's, laying in bed, right? And I'm like, why aren't you at work right now? And then as soon as she'd start talking, I'm like, oh, great. She's freaking hammered. Right now, I know why she's not at work. And she used to tell me all the time, what the hell does it matter to you? I'm only hurting me. I'm not hurting you. And now, as all this is said and done, now she goes back and she's apologized to me so many times, Casey, about I had no clue what I was doing to you and doing to us, right? I just thought it was me I was destroying, not realizing I was destroying everything around me because I guess that addiction just kind of makes you blind of that.
Well, it's the selfish side of addiction. And really, what's all important to the addict is getting that next fix, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or whatever it is. Like, I remember standing above my kid's bed, and they'd be sleeping, and I would tell them, tomorrow's going to be different. Dad's not going to drink, because I'd gone through something horrible the week before or the night before, fought with their mother or something. And I really believed it when I stood above their bed saying, tomorrow's going to be different. Dad's not going to drink again. And I wanted it to be true, but I wasn't equipped for the fight that was ahead of me. And so alcohol ended up winning, and it ended up winning a lot through the course of my life. And it wasn't until I sought help and went in an inpatient treatment center, sat down and did a self inventory and decided that I needed help. I remember when I got in the car accident and decided I needed help. And so I checked myself into a detox program, then moved over to an inpatient treatment. And one of the things I told people is that for 45 years, uh, Casey Scott was the CEO of Casey Scott. And we had some good years and we had some bad years. And towards the end, we almost went bankrupt. So I was ready to let somebody else be in charge, because everything that I knew and everything that I tried has gotten us to this point. And we did have some success and we had a lot of failure. But I knew that I couldn't beat this disease. I couldn't outthink it. I couldn't outsmart it. I couldn't outmaneuver it. I couldn't outlast it. So I had to, at this point, throw my hands up in the air and say, look, I've done everything I can. I can't tame this. I can't fix this. Let's let somebody else have a crack at it. And that's when it changed for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that ego has a way of grabbing a hold of us, right? Because, and especially as guys, right? Because we really do feel
Mm-hmm.
like we have total control over everything, right? We're strong. We can handle whatever is thrown our way. In reality, that's not true. Because I mean, because it happens. I mean, addiction is addiction. It doesn't matter what it is, right? It's same if you're a gambler
Mm-hmm.
or if you're addicted to porn or sex or eating, whatever it may be. We're just using that as the band-aid to help kind of not kind of to help us forget whatever it is that we're going through.
I remember sitting in rehab and I was in my therapist's office. And my therapist goes, hey, Casey, you want me to blow your mind? And I'm like, yeah, I'm in rehab. Let's do this. He goes, drinking's not your problem. I went, pretty sure drinking's my problem. That's why I'm in patient treatment in a rehab facilitation. He goes, no, your problems are your problems. And drinking was your solution. Let's not get it twisted. Drinking has now become a huge problem for you. But until we unpack that backpack and figure out what your problems are, what you're running from, what you're numbing from, what you're trying to find, chances of this taking are not good. So this is where we've got to be honest and we've got to open and we've got to do some digging. And I remember thinking, wow, that's crazy. Because all the time I thought drinking was my problem, but it wasn't my problem. My problems were my problems and drinking were my solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's so hard for us on the other side to figure out, right? Because again, we
Mm-hmm.
we don't understand addiction. In some of my public speaking that I've done, I've held up a blank piece of paper. First, I tell people, I'm like, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm actually a certified recovery coach, right? And I'm like, here's my certificate to prove it. And I hold it up and it's blank. And I'm like, well, it's blank because I failed at it miserably. I thought I knew everything there was about addiction when I didn't know shit about addiction
Mm-hmm.
at all. And I spent so many years enabling this person that I cared about, right? I tried hard love. I tried crying. I tried getting on my knees. Man, I did everything. And I did it over and over and over and over. And I remember someone asked me, well, how did it turn out for you? Turned out the same way every single time, right? However, that's all I knew. That's because Al-Anon wasn't a fit for me. I did about 3 classes in Al-Anon. I remember walking out of that 3rd one. And again, I'm not knocking Al-Anon because it has saved a lot of people. It just wasn't a fit
Mm-hmm.
for me, like some recovery centers aren't a fit for those going into recovery. When I walked out that 3rd time, I looked at my wife and I says, "I'll never step foot in one of these damn things ever again." I'm more pissed off now than I was when I went in because I still don't have
Mm-hmm.
any solutions, right? How is it that I can help you? Not realizing they needed to help themselves. There was nothing I can do except be there for support and love.
And that's sometimes all you can do. I'm looking on my phone because I was going to make a post because on Facebook and Instagram, I'm in a lot of these recovery communities, and this place called Sobriety is Cool posted this meme, and it really encompasses what sobriety is all about. Let me see if I can find it here. It
Okay.
says, "No one gets and stays sober unless they want to. Not if you beg them, not if you shame them, not if you use reason, emotion, or tough love. Only one thing that makes someone get sober, their own realization that they need to do it." In its simplest form, that's what it is. They say, love the addict, hate the disease. Love your son, love your daughter, don't enable them. And those are always easy to say when you don't have any skin in the game. But if it's your wife, your child that's going through this, for you to be able to sleep at night, you want to say, I did everything I possibly could. And sometimes the best thing you can do for that person is do nothing. But how do you tell a parent not to love their child? How do you tell a spouse not to pick up their loved one? And that's what's tough. And so this disease is so maddening because you're right. There's not a one size fits all for everybody. 12-step works for a lot of people. Meditation works for a lot of people. California sober works for a lot of people. I'm not the kind of guy in recovery to tell you what your recovery looks like. I get asked all the time what I'm doing and how I'm staying sober. And I always say, well, this is the program that I'm using. But I have a caveat where I have to say, this works for me. This makes sense for me. And I can do this. And I'm not going to tell you that it will work for you because I don't know if it will. Our circumstances aren't the same. Our personalities aren't the same. Our wiring is not the same. And so I always say on my podcast with Dr. Matt that there's a million different ways up Sober Mountain. You just have to find yours, one that's going to work for you. I look at recovery in the recovery community like a buffet. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a buffet, but the great thing about the buffet is that you start with an empty platter. And then you walk down a line and you can pick and choose from all kinds of different foods, all kinds of different desserts, all kinds of stuff that normally shouldn't be on the same plate. You can put on the same plate. And that's what's amazing about it. And that's the way I look at recovery. Fitness is a big part of my recovery. Meditation is a big part of my recovery. Honesty is a big part of my recovery. And so those are things that I put on my plate that I know I will be able to do today, tomorrow, and next week because it makes sense to me. And so that's how I stay sober. But my way of staying sober is not going to work for everybody out there, and it might not work for anybody. But for me, it does. And here I am 5 years sober, never had a relapse, knock on wood, and I just take it a day by day.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. That buffet. I never thought of it that way, but you're 100% right. And it's same for us on the other side as well. I mean, really, because it's all a learning process for us. Throughout the whole thing. And I'd like to switch it up here just a little bit. Something that when I was on your show, Casey, all I did was really speak about my wife's addiction. And I'm pretty sure you know Dave DeRocher, don't you? Do you know Dave DeRocher from the
Yeah.
OC Academy?
Yeah, I know. You know him, yeah.
Amazing man. I got to share a stage with him in 2022 down at the Dixie Convention Center. We were doing the Healing Utah Success Summit that Mallory Roosh, and I think Mallory, you know Mallory, I believe, and I started this thing, and I remember at the end of it, I went up to Dave and I said, "Hey, when you get back in town, I'd love to schedule a meeting with you and rack your brain a little bit because he's pretty powerful when he gets on stage. He has a great presence. He has a great way of getting his message out, and I'm just getting into it, right? I'm just starting to learn how to do some public speaking and." Anyway, January of 2023, I finally get an opportunity. He has his assistant Robin call me. I go up to the Other Side Academy. It's actually on a Thursday, the day when I was recording shows when I had my studio. And he comes in the office. He says, "What did you want to talk about, Al?" I said, "I just want some pointers, right? I want to speak like you speak. I want to be able to grab a hold of that audience and draw them in because I was watching people as he was talking and they were so focused on what he was saying." And as you know, Dave, if you give that man permission to speak openly, you better be ready for what comes out of his mouth. And he does it out of love, right? That's all that comes out of his mouth. He was on a chair that had rollers and he reached over and he grabbed my knee and he pulled himself right over to me and got right in my face. And he goes, "Al, you want to be a powerful speaker?" I said, yeah, Dave, I do." And he reared up and put his finger right in my face. And he says, "You start telling your effing story instead of your wife's effing story. That's her story to tell, not for you to tell it." And I mean, he just laid into me. And of course, my ego kicks in, right? And I'm putting up the wall. I'm going, "Oh, hell no, you're not going to speak to me this way." And I stopped myself and I realized I gave him permission. I owe him that. And he went on to tell me how he was feeling. God works in mysterious ways. Robin was my guest co-host that day, and we go into the studio and my guest doesn't show. Just, I don't know, disappeared. Couldn't get a hold of her on the phone, couldn't email her. She wasn't responding. So Robin goes, "So I guess we're not doing a show, huh?" And I says, "No, we're still going to do it. But today you're the host. I'm the guest." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" I says, "I'm going to listen to what Dave said." So that day, I told my story of me losing my job of 24 years because I had an every Friday and Saturday night cocaine and alcohol addiction. Every Friday and Saturday night, like clockwork. I did it for 8 years. Even the 3 years I was dating my past wife, she had no clue. She knew I was drinking because she was drinking with me. However, she didn't know one the other, right? And I remember my wife walked into the studio, come and watch the show that day, and she realized what was going on. And through my peripheral vision, I could literally see her chin bounce off the floor like, holy cow, he's telling his story for the very first time. The weight that took off my shoulders that day, Casey, was amazing, right? Because I didn't want anybody to know. And here I am asking my guests like yourself to be vulnerable and open up and share a part of their life that they're not proud of, but also it's made them who they are today. I'm keeping mine secret. And I finally opened up, and it has done such amazing things for me by doing that. And it's so cool when people like ourselves do these shows, right? We get these guests that come in, and you've probably had a lot more than I have because you've been doing your show longer. I've had about a half a dozen people reach out to me and go, I've watched some of your shows and I've never told my story, and I think it's time I do. And they've told their story for the very first time on this podcast. And it just, man, it just makes me feel so good that Dave actually did that for me, right? He really gave me a gift that day.
Yeah, it sounds like he freed you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's the power of sharing your story. You know, for the most part, sharing your story has nothing to do with me. I mean, I want to share my story, but it's for the audience or for somebody who's in active addiction or a loved one of someone who's active addiction, knowing that they're not alone in this. I mean, for the longest time, I've still got buddies and I hang out with them who still drink, and they started this journey with me, in college in the fraternity days, and they can still go out and party and have a great time. And I always thought there was something broken in me. I was like, why can't I do it? I'm doing the exact same thing these guys are, and it's not ruining their marriage. It's not ruining their job. It's not ruining their life. Why am I broken? And I remember just thinking to myself, there's something wrong with me. And it wasn't until I sat down in a 12-step room while I was in detox up at the University of Utah, where I was finally surrounded by 30 people who were just like me. They weren't broken. They just didn't know what was going on, and they didn't have the tools to help them. And that was freeing. When I stood up for the very first time and sober for maybe 2 days and said, hi, I'm Casey Scott, and I'm an alcoholic. And at that point, I wasn't even sure I believed it. But once I said it out loud, something was like, whoa. And you're right. I know exactly what you're talking about. I felt like this huge weight had been lifted off me. Like the secret was out. And I remember telling people in my family I'm an alcoholic, and they go, yeah, we know. You're the only one that didn't know. Yeah. We all had that way pegged a long time ago. We're just waiting for you to come around. And for a lot of addicts, it's the same way. You'll sit down in a room in a process group or wherever it may be, and you think, I'm not like these guys. These guys are bad. I just haven't figured it out. I'm okay. I'm not an addict. I'm not an alcoholic. I just got myself in a bad situation and I can't get it out. There's a self-realization that comes to you when you figure out you're just like them. Yeah. And you're one of them. And you go, okay. But you're right. We put ourselves on a pedestal, or we put ourselves in a different group because you don't want to admit that you're not in control. And one thing an addict's not in is control, never in control. They'll tell you in the rooms and they'll tell you in meetings that one is too many and 1,000's not enough. You break down that statement and that describes an addict to a T. One's too many and 1,000's not enough. The only choice I have when it comes to my addiction is to not pick up, to not do. And if I can make that choice not to, I'm okay. But once I do, the choice is no longer mine. The addict brain takes a hold and goes, okay, we know you love your family, we know you love your job, and those are things that are really important to you, but our main focus now is to get another beer. Our main focus now is to get another hit. Our main focus now is to get more of that, because at that point, it's not your choice anymore. The addict brain takes control, and the addict brain is powerful, crazy powerful.
Yes, yes, it is. And it seems like every time it comes back, it literally comes back with vengeance, right? Like it's pissed at you because you put it away for so long. So it's gonna go, okay, well, I'm gonna grab you even tighter this time. Because that's what I
Mm-hmm.
saw with my ex, right? Whenever she relapsed, I mean, two and a
Well,
half.
it's kind of like the brain is saying, we're making up for lost time. Let's we got some making up to do. So
Yeah,
let's go. And what the body doesn't realize, or the mind, I guess I should say, is that there's a tolerance that comes along with drinking. And so, when I quit drinking, I was drinking 18 beers a day, 24 beers a day. Now, if I tried to drink 24 beers today, I'd be in a coma, because my body's not used to it. But the brain thinks we need more. And so that's why you get overdoses. And that's why, because an addict goes back to what they were using before they quit, and their body is no longer in that shape anymore. So that's when the overdoses occur.
yeah, yeah, 100% right. What what gave you the idea to start your podcast, Project Recovery?
So I'm in rehab. I know I've lost the TV job because my mugshot is on every local newspaper and TV station in the market. And if you work for the news and you make the news, that doesn't make the news happy. And so I knew that was over. And I remember sitting in rehab, and that's why I came up with the idea for Project Recovery. We would sit in the van as we were going to meetings, and I would be like, it wasn't called Project Recovery at the time. I just called it a podcast. And I would say that I'm going to do a podcast. And I told everybody in the house, and they were like, that's a great idea. And I go, I'm going to kind of show everybody what it's like to get sober and let them go along this journey with me. And so for me, it was a safety net, and it was an accountability thing. And so I said, so I'm just going to let people go along with me. And so we did we'd do the podcast in the van, and I'd be in the front seat, and we'd ask a question from one of the members in the back, or, somebody in the house. And it was just kind of this thing that we used to get me through rehab. And I thought, you know what, I'm really going to do that. And so when I got out of rehab after 45 days, I had to have a meeting with the TV station, KSL, where I work today, by the way. And I went into a HR meeting with the president of the company and the HR director. And if you ever find yourself in a meeting with the HR director and the president of the company, good things aren't normally happening for you. It's not normally a good situation. And so I went in there, and they sat me down, and they go, and I had held out hope thinking that I was still going to keep the job somehow, some way. And I sat down in that room, I knew that they weren't going to keep me on. And the president goes, hey, we're glad you're doing good, and we want you to continue doing good. But unfortunately, because of the circumstances, we're going to have to let you go. And I go, I get that. I mean, I understand that. And I said, but I got this idea. She goes, what? I go, I've got an idea. I want to do a podcast and kind of go through what I'm going through to get sober, and let people go with me on the ride. And the president of the company goes, let me get this right. I'm firing you, and you're pitching me another job. I go, yeah. I've got alimony, I've got child support, and I've got a house payment. I guess I am. And she goes, well, let me think about it. And I go, okay. And I pack up my stuff, and I come home. And it was probably 3 days later, they call me back, and they go, this idea interests us a little bit, but we can't just have you doing it all by yourself. I mean, I'm 45 days out of rehab. It's a lot to put on a guy.
Right.
They go, could you get a doctor to do it with you? Because we need somebody that's going to give you some validity. We can't just let an addict 45 days out of rehab have a podcast and, do this. I go, yeah, I think I know a guy. Let me see what I can do. And so I've been working with Dr. Matt on previous TV shows, and we were getting ready to actually launch a podcast. because we were both going through divorces. It was going to be called Single Dads, and kind of our journey through that. And I called him and I said, "Hey, I know I stiffed you on that single dad thing." And he goes, "I understand." He goes, "How you doing?" I go, "I think I'm doing pretty good. I've been sober now 60 days, and I'm just trying to figure out what my next move is and how I keep moving forward." I said, "I got this idea, and you can say no, and you can tell me to go to hell, whatever you want. I get it, but hear me out." And he goes, "Okay." I want to do this podcast about addiction, but I want to focus it more on recovery and what those are doing after the addiction and how they're living their lives and moving forward and doing other things. And KSL said that I could do this if I could get a doctor to do it with me. He goes, "I am." I go, "You're in?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Are you giving it everything you got?" And I go, 100%. He goes, "Then I'm in." And so now I think yesterday we just recorded our 319th episode. We maybe missed 2 weeks in 3 years. And what we do is allow people to come on and share their story. And when you said you were sharing your wife's story, that resonated with me because we have people on the podcast and they will talk about their story, and they will often stop and go, "I can't tell this person's story or my wife's, because that's their story. My story is how I see it, how it affected me, and what I went through." So that's the first part of our podcast, is that I share what's going on in my life. I talk about the ups and downs, and then we transition into a guest and hear what they're doing and how they've changed their lives. And Dr. Matt, who's a clinical therapist, says that he does this show because it makes him feel wonderful. He had no idea. He's not an addict. He has got addiction in his family. He had no idea what wonderful things people are doing in the recovery community, and what gracious, wonderful, talented, beautiful human beings are in that a lot of times don't get a second thought because of the stigma of addiction, who don't get a second chance, who are often just discarded because they are assumed to be broken or unfixable. And that is not the case at all. I love it when somebody says a leopard doesn't change its spots. I got 315 leopards who can show you their spots and change.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. The recovery community in Utah is second to none. I mean, with Fit to Recover and the summits that you guys do and the podcast, this is an amazing place for recovery, and one that you wouldn't think, but it is.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that, Casey. And I've said this on many of my shows as well, that I am actually so grateful to be a part of the recovery community. I have met some of the most amazing individuals I've ever met in my whole life. And I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
people who lived on the streets for years, right? I'm talking who they went through some really bad trauma in their life, and that's what caused them to go towards their addiction, right? To band-aid that pain. And you see who they are as individuals today and what they are doing is just so freaking amazing.
You tell me what circles you'd have had to been in to run into a Manny Lopez if it wasn't for the recovery community.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you did, you probably back in the old Manny Lopez days, you were in the wrong community, right? But to
Yeah,
see who this man is today is freaking just
right?
amazing.
And you see stories like that all the time. Unfortunately, the dark side of addiction takes too many too soon. And it breaks my heart. When I open up Facebook, I open Instagram, and I see an RIP of someone who just lost their battle of addiction. And I wish I could save everybody. But the truth is, the only person I can save is myself. And that's the way addiction works. It's like that quote that I read you earlier. The only addict can do it. You can't love this disease away. Unfortunately, you can't pray this disease away. That's not how it works. I wish it was. But it's got to be something within inside the addict who says, "I am done. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired, and there's got to be something different. So I'm either going to give this all I got, or I'm going to lose to this disease." And that's really, there's three options when you've got an addict. there's recovery, there's death, or there's incarceration. There's really no middle ground. You'll find addicts and you'll find people who use substances that can string together a good amount of time for a while. But if given the chance, drugs and alcohol will always win.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely will. That's why you got to stay on it, right? For those in recovery, it literally is changing. It's changing your whole life, right? It's changing what you're used to because you do have to live it pretty much on a daily basis. And some can do it by going to one meeting a week. I've had a few guests that they stopped going to meeting years ago and they're doing just great. And there's others I've had on the show, they got to go to a meeting every single freaking day to keep them on that path. Again, our journeys are all different, right? And with the 300 plus episodes that you've done, I remember about my 4th month into starting this podcast, I went to my producer and I says, I don't know if this is going to really go much longer because it seems like everyone's story's the same, and I'm like, I don't know who wants to watch a show where everyone hears the same story all the time. And he goes, no, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. And so I kept doing it. And it took a couple months later, or I don't know how long really. And it finally dawned on me. It was the journey that was different. The stories may be the same, but everyone's journey is a little bit different. It's unique, right? I mean, it took a car accident for you, right? A car accident and losing your job to go, okay, I'm done with this, right? I've had other people say it was me losing my kids. I had other people say I was tired of living on the streets. I finally had enough. So everyone's journey is just a little bit different. And that's what I love about the podcast that you do and podcasts other people do in recovery is hearing everyone's unique journey and how they got to where they're at today. And one of the most neatest things that I've gotten from all of it is we all come out to find out we're a totally different person than who we thought we were. And we look at ourselves and we finally probably love ourselves for the very first time, right? We can literally wrap our arms around us and go, frick, I love who I am as an individual. And they start finding out these talents that they have, right? I mean, we got SL Manny boy, Manny Lopez, he's going out and he's doing his songs about recovery. And you've got a lot of people who I've met like Clay and Jordan and Robin and even Dave himself over at the Other Side Academy, who've got all these other talents. And I was speaking with Jordan one day out there at the Other Side Academy. I was there for an event. And I was looking around the room and I said, you know what is so cool? I says, a lot of these people have a lot of talent. And he goes, Al, that is one of the coolest things about working here is when you start seeing someone finally coming out of that shell and they start realizing who they are as individuals and to see the talent that's coming out of these people that they didn't even realize they had. And it's good talent, right? I mean, people who can bake, people who can draw, sing.
You want to talk about a talent? Talk about an addict who's got a $1,500 a day habit, but has no job. How do they come up with the money? How do they figure that out? I always tell people the same thing that makes me a good addict makes me a good employee. It's the all or nothing mentality. It's I'm going to figure out how to make this happen. I mean, you see it all the time of, people doing things to get what they need. And that's what an addict really does. They figure out how to get what they need. And so they're smart, they're creative, they're talented, and they're tenacious. And so once they figure out who they are and they start being able to use this power for good, the world is unstoppable. You know what I mean? They really, there's a thing that happens in recovery. After you get to a certain point, they'll go, hey, what do you want your life to look like in 5 years? And I remember mine was probably 9 months into recovery. They go, what do you want your life to look like in 5 years? And my answer was, I don't want to be in pain. I want to be able to provide for my family. but I don't want to be in pain. Now, up to that point, I had good success. I had radio shows, TV shows, big house, wife, 3 kids, and everything. And I thought, well, this is the way my life worked. I front loaded it with fun, and the back end's just going to be me going to a job. But I'm okay with that. I don't want to be in pain. I just want to be able to pay my bills. And that was my answer. And they go, now times that by 1,000. And I was like, you're crazy. If I can just get to not being in pain and be able to pay my bills, I'll be ecstatic. I'll be stupefied. It'll be amazing. And they go, no, times it by 1,000. And I was like, well, you're still on drugs, because that's never going to happen. I'm never going to have that life again. I have blown that away. I have pissed off everybody in my life, and I'm never going to get a chance again. I'm never going to get that opportunity. But I'll be darned if they're not right. My life is better today than I ever imagined. I'm more honest, more authentic, more genuine, more present than I ever thought I was. All the stuff that I had before meant nothing compared to what I have now. And I will give it everything I got to keep it. And that's what's amazing about recovery, is you've got people who had trauma, who've lived on the streets, who have nothing, who come out on the other end of these podcasts, living wonderful lives, finding love again, finding success in the job market, buying homes, taking vacation, being present. And that's why people like to listen to these podcasts. Everybody loves a comeback story. Everybody loves to see the resilience of the human body, the human mind, human nature, and to know that you're not defined by your biggest fails. You're defined by what you do afterwards. Yeah. How much fight you have left in you, and what can you give. And so that's why I think people like these kind of podcasts. They like to see, the resilience of the human body.
Yeah, and it's never too late, right, Casey? I mean, seriously, I know someone who's in their 70s, and I was talking to them about some stuff, and they're like, well, it's too late for me, right? It's too late for me. This is how I lived my life all my life, and it's too late. And I'm like, it's never too late. Never too late. I mean, Colonel Sanders didn't become a millionaire with Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was in his 60s. I mean, when he's in his 60s, he could have done the same thing. Go, well, it's too late for me. What can I do to make something of my life at age 60? So it's
RK Diem seize the day.
Yeah.
We had a guy on our podcast who at 63 decided meth was going to be what he wanted to do. And he took meth for a run for 3 years and lost it all. And so now he's 66, and his options are succumb to the disease or fight. And this guy found a fight and gave it all he got. And now he's working in a recovery center, giving back to a community who gave him his life back. And he says, Casey, I'm happier now than I've ever been.
Yeah. Well, that's what recovery does for us. I mean, it does that for pretty much the majority of us that stay on that same path, right? Because you hear them say that their life is amazing, and those that are going to be certified peer support specialists or coaches or whatever direction that they go, as they're giving back to the community and giving back to others and helping them in their journey, every single one of them has said, you know what, I think it's helping me more than I'm helping them. And it's because
I tell people that all the time in the podcast. They go, I think it's so great that you do this podcast. And I go, well, I appreciate it, but you'll never know what I get out of doing this podcast. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me rooted in the recovery community, and it gives me a purpose. And I need it. And it's a wonderful thing. And, we had a guy on the podcast yesterday, a wonderful guy named Morgan. And he says every once in a while, he's been sober now 2 years, that he'll get a little depressed, a little bit of a funk. And he says the thing that gets him out of that is service. He goes, because when I'm thinking of others and helping others, I'm not thinking about myself. I don't have time to be depressed. And he goes, so whenever I feel myself getting a little bit of a funk, I go, who can I help? What can I do? And he goes, as of right now, it's working. And so service is really an instrumental part of recovery. When you call and ask me to do this podcast, the answer is always going to be yes, because somebody did it for me. Somebody picked up the phone when I needed them. Somebody passed along the knowledge that I needed to get the recovery that I wanted. And so that's the deal you make when you get into recovery. You don't get to keep it for yourself. You got to share it and tell it to everybody and anybody who will listen, because you never know who you're going to touch or who you're going to get or who you're going to help. And so when we do podcasts like this, like mine and yours, and you think you're telling the same story over and over again, you're not, because you don't know which is going to resonate with that person out there that needs to hear that message, or who's going to be there when that message is being delivered. So I say keep doing your podcast. Do it as long as you can. And I will do mine as long as guests are willing to come in there. And then even afterwards, I'll do it, because it's the way I give back. And that's what I really enjoy.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. When I lost my studio in March of last year, I had a few people go, "Well, Al, you had a hell of a run." Right? It was really cool. And I still had guests booked out for 2 months. I'm like, "What do you mean I had a hell of a run? This isn't stopping." I mean, I enjoy it. And back then I did my shows on Thursdays as well. And now I do them on Fridays. And I mean, there's no way I'm stopping. And I did them in my apartment there for a little bit, you know, and you could just see the background of my living room in the apartment. However, it was okay for me. I didn't have all the fancy equipment that I had in the studio, and I wasn't going to stop. And I believe actually this episode is my 244th episode. In March it'll
That's
be
amazing.
Thank you. 3 years in March, and there's no way I plan on stopping. I've interviewed people from
No.
the UK, Canada, all around the United States, people here who are local. I mean, Fridays are it's my drug day. Really, it seriously is, because I cannot wait to get on a show and speak to my guests, because I never know what's going to come out of it, because again, it's raw. We don't script nothing. And it just, I just freaking love it. And the feelings I get from it and what I learn from my guests are things that really, whether you have a loved one in addiction or you're in recovery yourself, it affects everyone. I mean, everyone. What
Mm-hmm.
you learn from guests on the show, on your show, my show, all the other shows, it's stuff we can use in our everyday life, right? We get so stuck looking at life through a straw. We got to remove that damn straw and look at all the blessings that's everywhere around us. And the people who make us realize or help us realize that those blessings are there are people in the recovery community.
I tell people all the time, I say, if you can get 45 days at a rehab center without an addiction, take it, because it's an amazing experience. We talked about a little while ago, at 45, I figured out who I really was, which seems strange to find out at 45 who you are, because you get caught up in life and what the perception of you may be and who you want to be and all that other stuff. And through rehab and sitting down and doing self-inventory and process, I figured out who I was. We had this exercise in rehab where there was 18 of us or 15 on a couch. And on the piece of paper, we were supposed to put our name up top and then pass the paper around until it got back to you. And the job or assignment was, when you see the name, first thing that pops into your brain, you write it on that piece of paper. And so they pass it around. When you get it back to you, you're going to see what the people in the house think of you. And I remember, I don't think I've ever told this. I remember thinking, if I don't get my piece of paper back with 18 numbers and have funny next to each one of them, I'm going to be mad. They don't know me, because all my stock was in me being funny. And and that's what I lived for. I thought that's what my job was, to make you laugh and do that. And so when I got that paper back, there wasn't a number with funny next to it. It was caring, thoughtful, provocative, wonderful, friendly. Not funny wasn't on there. And I thought, that is weird, because here I thought my only identity was the funny guy, to make you laugh. But here I've been with these guys in this house now for 30 days, And funny is not something that comes to their mind. It's more things about me that I didn't think I possessed, that I didn't think people saw in me, because I thought only people wanted me to do was make them laugh. But they thought that I was caring, loving, friendly, good listener. Those are all things that I didn't think I possessed, because I thought I was just this alcoholic, funny guy. And so you're right, at 45, to figure out who you are and what you can become and what you want to be, it is never too late. It's never too late.
Yeah.
It's never too late to do that self-inventory.
Thank you, Casey, for sharing that. When I lost my job 14 years ago, 2009, I had a friend call me up, and really, this is a true friend. He told me that he didn't trust me. And I'm like, how the heck did you not trust me? I've never stole from you. I always treated your family with respect. I treated your home with respect. And, that's how I was looking at it. And he says, because you're a liar and a manipulator. And I basically told him, BS. Yeah, no way. That's not me. And
That's what a liar and manipulator would say.
Right, exactly, right. So it took me some time to realize it. And I started thinking, and I went, I was always in trouble when I was a kid. And I learned how to lie and manipulate my way around it, not realizing as I was getting into my teenage years and my adult years, I was mastering my craft and mastering it very, very well. And I thought, holy cow, he's right. I've spent the last 14 years rebuilding myself, my integrity, who I am. My word means everything to me, everything to me. When I say I'm going to be there, I will be there. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to follow through with whatever it is, because I don't want to go back. I don't know if this will make you feel better or not. It took me till my mid-50s, Casey, to finally realize who I was, who Al Richards really was as a human being. I tell people who I used to be. I went to therapy for 6 months to learn how to control a temper that was just terrible, terrible. I mean, just a little teeny tiny spark would just set my fuse off. And I didn't care what was around me, who was in front of me, I was attacking it. And my wife's addiction, ex-wife's addiction, put me on this path that I'm on right now. She literally told me this on the way home one day after doing a show. She goes, "You finally found your why."
Mm-hmm.
And I went, "What?" And she goes, "I'm watching you in the studio." She goes, "I've watched you now do like 6 shows." And she goes, "You found your why." And I've said this in some of my public speaking. My greatest moments, Casey, haven't come from my greatest moments. They've come from my frickin' failures, my bad choices, my mistakes. That's where my greatest moments have come from, because it's made me who I am today. It made me open my eyes. Material things are nice, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
60. I hit 60 last July. I live in a trailer. I went and bought a 32-foot camping trailer because I was tired of paying $1,200 a month for a little 900 square foot apartment. And, at first I was joking around saying I'm a professional camper. And then one of the coaches I was working with said, "Al, man, that's your castle. Don't say you're a professional camper. Own it. Own it, man. That's your castle, right? Who gives a crap?" And it really started opening my eyes of who I am as an individual, just like what you just said with that letter going around, and you saw all those amazing things about Casey that you did not even realize that you had, when we've had it in us this whole time. We were just, again, looking through that straw and not seeing what was here.
Yeah. You said something that's very important to me in my recovery, and it's owning it. You've got to own it. You've got to feel the feels, and you're going to have to sit through the shit. And some days are good, some days are bad, but you just got to own it. I remember through my addiction, I was a master manipulator. I was a master liar. and I could manipulate any situation to get what I got, what I needed, what I wanted. So now I own that, and I still work on that, and I try to own everything about my recovery, and that means owning all my fails. And I've got a list of them, and that's why I'll put my mugshot out on any platform, and it's there. I'll own everything that I've done, and it's part of it, because if I own it, then nobody else can take it from me. And so, or hold it over my head or use it against me. I own it because I did it. It's not who I am, it's who I was. And if you want to know who I am, get to know me now, because I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to be of service. I'm trying to give back to a community that's given me so much. I'm trying to be the best human, brother, father, ex-husband, boyfriend, employee I can be. And I don't win every day. I don't win every day, Al. And that's okay, because nobody wins every day.
Yeah.
That's just not how the game works. You just get up and you try to do better. And if you do that and you be honest and you be authentic and you be present, I think at the end of the day, you're winning.
No, you're 100% right. And with you even going back to that letter, you was hoping to see 18 funnies on there, and I just had a situation here not too long ago with someone who was basically I feel like I was on trial the whole time. You're right. Things were being perceived of things that I said, and I remember being really upset about it, because I'm like, this person doesn't even know who I am. I mean, at all, right? And I worked my ass off to get to where I'm at today. And it's almost like I wanted that pat on the back, right? I wanted that pat on the back. And luckily, working with some coaches, they're like, well, Al, that's not on you, that's on them. So it took me some time to finally realize it, right? That yeah, I mean, who we are today, and it means a lot to us. And by getting things out there, you just said it, no one can hold that carrot over your head ever again, because if you're the one that's saying, hey, this is who I am, I own it, take it or leave it, then
Yeah.
they have no power against you at all.
I get a lot of my words of wisdom and a lot of my daily instruction through memes. And so you were just talking about a situation with somebody else, and there was this meme out with Christian Bale. He's the Batman. You know who Christian Bale is?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is what he says about something similar to that. If you have a problem with me, call me. If you don't have my number, then that means you don't know me well enough to have a problem.
I love it.
But that's the thing, is if you have a problem with me, then come talk to me, address it to me. And if you don't have my number, then you don't know me well enough to have a problem, because I don't owe you anything. You know what I mean? I owe my kids, I owe myself, I owe my girlfriend, and I owe my family. I owe my employee because they provide this lifestyle for me, but they get something in return too. Those are the people that I owe. But at the end of the day, the person I owe the most is myself. And I owe myself the ability to make sober thoughts, sober decisions, be present in my kid's life, and live the life that I want to live.
Yeah, amen. Because that's how I'm seeing it, right? I am who I am. I just want to spread love, care, kindness. That's just who I am, right? That's who I am today, and I'm so grateful that's who I am today. And if you don't want to see it and you want to judge me just off of things that I say, you're not willing to look deep enough, and it's okay.
Mhm.
It's all right, right? Because as
And we
long as
all make
you know,
mistakes.
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I'll make 3 or 4 today. I'm sure of it.
Only 3 or 4? Gosh, that's pretty good. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to ask you how you do that.
Well, we're starting a little late, so I've already made 3 or 4, and I'll make 3 or 4 more.
All right, got it. Well, we're coming up to the hour, Casey, and I know you're a busy guy, and I don't want to take a lot of your time up. And again, just thank you so much for being here. You know, I remember watching your show a couple years ago, and you read a letter that your daughter wrote.
Yeah.
And I had a guest out of South Carolina who works with families who have loved ones that are in recovery. And she says one of the assignments she gives to them is for them to write a letter to addiction, tell them what they think about it. And all these light bulbs started going off. And I wrote a letter to addiction last year. And I read it at our October 17th Healing Utah Success Summit. And I remember when I did my rough draft, I had someone that I trusted very well. I had her read it, and she goes, Al, this is a really cool letter, except you're not telling addiction really how you feel. I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah, I am. It's right here on paper, right? She goes, no, 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 no. Read that. Read it. And I started going through it and I was reading it and I went, holy crap, you're right. So before I read this letter at our Healing Utah Success Summit, I let everyone know, if you cannot deal with bad language, and there's children here in the audience, and you don't want to hear it, please step out now. Because I'm going to really tell you how the F I feel, right?
Right.
When I read that letter, holding my tears back and seeing all the tears in the audience, because a lot of those people in our audience were people in long-term recovery, and some were family members. That happened to me when I heard you read your letter, that letter that your daughter wrote on your show. I sat here on my computer with freaking tears just pouring down my cheeks because it hit home to me so much, because that was in the depth of my ex-wife's addiction during that time. And I know it was affecting you because I could see your emotions coming out while you read that letter. Man, that opens some light bulbs for us, right? I mean, it turns on the light bulbs for us, right? To realize the damage that we're doing.
For maybe those who don't know, it was probably 3 years ago. My daughter had an assignment in class, an English class, to write something that was impactful in her life. And this was right when I was in rehab. And she called it That Was Then, This Is Now. And it was the way my addiction looked through her eyes. And she talked about me getting divorced, me getting in an accident. And her teacher had reached out to me after the assignment was due and says, hey, your daughter wrote this pretty cool letter. If she'll let you read it, you should probably read it. And so she came home one day and I said, hey, your teacher says you wrote a letter. Could I read it? She goes, oh, yeah, Dad, I'll send it to you. She is my daughter, so she's a little bit forgetful. And 2 weeks later, I go, hey, I never got that letter. Will you send it to me? And she goes, yeah, I'll do it right now. So she sent it to me and she went back to school. And I sat upstairs in my house on my bed and I go, I'm going to read this letter. And so I started reading it. Halfway through it, I got up like I was watching a scary movie because it was so raw and so real that I had to walk away from it. I gathered composure and went back and finished it. It was so eye-opening to me what my disease had done to my family, and especially my oldest daughter, who was probably more around than any of my children for it because she was the oldest. And, you know, as a dad, you just want to provide for your children. And when you sit down and read an essay of all the way you've hurt your child, that'll make you question some things. And it was an eye opener. And I knew that I had to share this letter. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. So I showed up to the podcast one day and I didn't tell my co-host, I didn't tell the producer. I said, I got something, I'm just going to try it. Let's see where it goes. And so I read the letter for Dr. Matt and producer Josh, and he videoed it and then put it on the internet. And it went viral with over 6 million views, I think. It ended up getting us on the Today Show, morning show in Australia. I still get emails and texts today saying, I was your daughter in the letter. I was you in the letter. I was your ex-wife in the letter. Your daughter has a wonderful way of words of describing how addiction affects the family. And please tell her thank you. So that was one of those things, like when Dave gave you your blessing and your gift of freedom, my daughter gave me that. And, today, she's a freshman at the University of Utah on a full ride scholarship, academics. She's my best friend. Her and her sister and her brother, and we have a wonderful family. I've got a great relationship with my ex-wife. I've got an amazing girlfriend who's been with me for 5 years, and my life is great. And the reason I have all of this today is because of recovery, because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I wanted something better, and I knew my children deserved something better. So that is my why. That's why I do it, because life is just so much better this way.
I love it. Yeah. And all of our guests have said that exact same thing, right? Life is amazing today because of the choice that they made to get on that recovery train.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, Casey, how do people find Project Recovery?
Anywhere you get your, your podcast, just go to Project Recovery. Should be the first one that pops up. I hope it is, but
Yeah.
I think it is. I'll be honest with you. I don't listen to my own podcast because I live it.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Every once in a while, I may go through just to watch something that I remember them saying, and I wanted to make sure I got it down right. Yeah, but I do the
Yeah.
same. I do the same thing. Again, Casey, man, thank you so much for taking time. We've been working on this for a while because you've got a
Yeah.
busy schedule, you got a lot going on, and yeah, I remember we saw you. I was at the gym with Andrea. She was on the treadmill next to me, and she saw you on the TV there, and she goes, "I'm texting him right now." I'm like, "Well, text him and tell him when the hell's he going to come on my show?" And she actually did.
Well, we made it happen. And I'm so sorry it took so long, but I'm glad to be here. And I think what you're doing now is amazing. Congratulations on your success, your recovery, and the life that you've made for yourself. You're an amazing individual, and I'm very lucky to call you friend.
Well, thank you, Casey, and same here. Thank you for all the lives that you're touching, and I'm just so grateful. So, guys, there's another show for you. Again, thank you to all our listeners, all our guests, our past sponsors, guys. None of this would be possible if it wasn't for you. You guys are the ones that are making this a success. It's not me. I'm just giving you a platform to come out and use your voice and share what it is that you want to share. We're going to leave you with this as we do at the end of every show. Remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.